So thank you very much for inviting us along today to talk a little bit more about the Education Summit from last year. So a number of us on the call here were involved in it, and obviously a few of us were involved in organising it. So we're just going to give you a brief overview of where the summits have come from, the kind of things we've focused on for this year's summit. I'm hoping Maria is here to join in on part 3, but if she's not, we will talk through day 3 as well.
Yeah,
So,
I'm here. Sorry.
oh, you are here. Brilliant. Excellent. So, and is Nikki online? She wasn't a moment ago, but no, I think we've lost Nikki. That's fine. So I'll talk through day 1 as well. So a brief bit of history for you. The first summit was actually hosted by HBA Bioinformatics in Cape Town in May 2019. And the aim really is was to bring together bioinformatics trainers and educators to try and look at developments of standards and guidelines around bioinformatics training and education globally. See some of the kind of things we were talking through in GOBLET. The format really was a working meeting, and that's the idea, and that's something that we've done with all of the summits. It really is a get together to work on things rather than just having the sort of nice discussions and talks about what different people are doing, and to actually come out with documents that are usable, etc. at the end. The audience was a mixture of bioinformatics trainers and educators involved both in short courses and degree programs. And this then continued into the second summit, which was our virtual summit, which we hosted at EBI last year in May 2020. And then obviously this year's summit was again virtual. The hosting organisations are many and varied and known to obviously many members of GOBLET, so it's HBA Bionet, ISCB, GOBLET, EBI, Cabana. We have monthly meetings to try and keep up again the momentum of work. And as we've gone over the years since 2019, we've had more organisations and definitely more people join in that time as well. So the sort of topics that we've included and often go through from one to another are things like competencies and curriculum development. So this is where the ISCB, the new version of the ISCB Competency Framework, along with guidelines, and there will be a paper on this, they're all coming out soon. ISCB endorsement of both degree and short course programs. Train the trainer, so looking at again a virtual train the trainer. Bringing together the trainer portal and the GOBLET website and all of the relevant trainer information for that. We've also then talked about things like going virtual and about training in LMICs. So the outputs to say is that definitely the framework, the trainer portal with the various guides, resources, links, a train the trainer curriculum, which is still being worked on at the moment, was hoped to launch this year, is now looking to move into next year, and also looking at guidelines for the endorsement actual process and thinking about what sort of things need to be looked at for that to happen. So in 2021, essentially it was 3 days with 3 themes, so a theme per day across 3 time zones, which made for very interesting scheduling, as you can imagine, but it worked, which is the good thing. In numbers, we had 90 people attend from, I think we counted about 35 different countries across multiple time zones if you work it out. Okay, we ran it across 3, the number of time zones involved were definitely much more than that. And here's just a couple of snaps where we tried to capture as many of the people who were on the call as we actually could. So as we said, we ran it across these 3 time zones to try and catch them all, and we tried to have an hour common where we could to try and bring as many people together, because obviously one of the great things about these summits is trying to bring together people from all different countries, all different organisations, different places. And the only thing with having it in the 3 time zones, we want to try and make sure that we had that one point at least where everybody could meet and discuss should they wish to. We ran it on Zoom, and we had Slack channel support, and we had a Google site, which Maria and colleagues created to enable us to keep all that information in one place. And obviously a number of Google Docs again, so we could actually all work together and capture that work that we were doing as we worked through. So our focus for the 3 days, day 1 was around the competency framework and looking at extending the ISCB framework to cover data science in biomedical sciences, and also thinking about issues and challenges around developing and delivering health data science training. Day 2, we focused on the virtual education and training. When we ran the virtual conference in the virtual summit rather in May 2020, obviously it was very soon after we'd all suddenly gone virtual. So it was very much what are we all doing? This year was a really nice chance to look back and say, okay, so what have we achieved over this past year? And actually, how is that going to influence what we do going forwards? Because, this is not, it's going to be around to stay. How do we make the most of it? But also bringing into that, again, fair issue. So looking at how can we ensure that anything we're developing is fair, making sure that we were applying those principles. The third day then focused on our work in ELMIC, so looking at effective, efficient building of infrastructure and activities in these countries. So to give you a quick overview on day one, so the focus on day one was around the competency framework. So really it was a sanity check of version 3, and also looking at what we'd started to put together last year and over the monthly meetings around guidelines for its use, and looking at how we could actually really disseminate that in the best way. And then agreeing on this roadmap so we could broaden the framework to also include bioinformatics in clinical practice, and then start work on those. So there were 2 breakout groups, one who focused more on looking at version 3 and seeing that it was complete and usable, and thinking about how to really maximize its use. And breakout 2 was focused more around extending these competencies into clinical practice, and also looking at whether there were other professions and, could we take that methodology to apply to those. Outcomes, I won't read through all of these because you'll get the presentation to look through, but basically we have got the paper ready for final edit, the guidelines for submission were ready, and there was degree process for this framework extension. Following roles have been sort of drafted, so data scientist, data engineer, clinical bioinformatician, and there are others to remain open and look at in more detail. And there's a few different stakeholder bodies that were identified to then go out to again bring more people in to look at those extended frameworks. And again, there's going to be task forces set up to look at this in more detail. In terms of the day 2, where we looked at virtual education and training, again, we discussed a number of topics, and we gave up to the opportunity to decide which ones I'd like to focus on. Tools and technologies came out top, and it was a really good chance to look back at what we collected last year and then expand upon that for this year, along with new case studies. We also looked very much at challenges and highlights, and really wanted to capture especially the highlights. So I think sometimes we focus a little on the negative side of the big changes and the big challenges we'd had, but it was really also nice to capture some of those real highlights as well, where we'd found that virtual training had actually helped us try do different things that we hadn't managed to do. And then thinking about where would those experiences take us in terms of our future training. So, even with a return to the ability to do face-to-face, where does that leave the virtual side of things? We also talked around assessing learning virtually, especially for those people who are involved more in degree programs. So again, looking at some of the challenges that we made last time, have they been met? Are there new challenges arising or new methods around assessment? And we also looked a little bit at the fair training side of things. We actually had our cross all time zones discussion was around sort of fair training, and really saying, how can we use what we've been doing? How can we make sure all the benefits from the virtual are made available wider, and thinking around fair practices as a way of really enabling us to get all of this fantastic material out there, and a general discussion on what it means to be fair. Outcomes and next steps from this, really, I think we had a body of knowledge that came out of the 2022 summit, and we really added to that from the discussion, along with also the ISCB web last year, where there was a big discussion around going virtual as well. We've captured changes in tools and then revised use. What we now need to do really is consolidate this information and find an appropriate home for it. And again, this is going to be another set of meetings where we get together to discuss this in more detail. Challenges and highlights. So again, we looked at those challenges, and as I say, we really captured positives as well as some of the negatives, so that we could have this experience shared, and that we could really say, yes, we did do some fantastic stuff through this as well. And the assessing learning virtually, again, looked at the challenges, and again, we need to look at those outcomes and again share them with others. In terms of the fair training, obviously there's going to be more discussion on fair training as you go through the AGM, and we've got the workshop at the end of the week. But really, it was kind of looking, we had a quite a mixed audience. So some people who knew a lot about FAIR and many people who didn't know that much about FAIR training as well. So actually, we often ended up discussing a bit more about what was meant by FAIR training. And really, it just demonstrated that there is still this need for guidance on what and how when it comes to making training fair. Obviously, the next step after we met at the summit was the web at ISCB, where more discussion was, or more work was done on the fair training piece, and obviously there's more work to be done this week as well to continue on that line. So it's really nice to be another step in that process. I'm now going to hand over to Maria to talk about the ELMIC side of things. So Maria, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the invitation as well to this meeting. Well, my name is Maria Bernardi, and the day 3 session was first an idea of Patricia Carajal, who couldn't attend here because she's on a course, but she planned to work a little bit on focusing on ELMIC's kind of challenges. And at the end of the brainstorming, we ended up with pretty ambitious topics to be discussed during day 3. And this was amazing. We also count with the help of Gabriela Merino. She isn't here right now, but I would like to highlight that this was a collective work. We start thinking on the particular challenges of the ELMIC kind of countries, and we think that all these 6 topics would be really rich for discussing. First, the guidelines for bioinformatics training in ELMIC. Patricia and Verena, she is for H3 Bionet. They were working on this and they were able to obtain a lot of feedback from these sessions. We talked about also the core infrastructure for sustainable bioinformatics, because the infrastructure is a really challenging area for bioinformatics in ELMIC country. And then we would like to have a session to talk about bioinformatics training at not hotspot regions, because although these regions tend to be really big countries or really big continents, the level developing of bioinformatics tend to be only in a few capitals. So we would like to think about how to bring all this development to other regions. Then we talk about the language barriers for bioinformatics education, since bioinformatics is a developing area. The language barriers sometimes could be a little bit challenging, because the lingua franca used to be English, but it isn't for most of the ELMIC country the maternal tongue. So you have to learn another language and then produce and work on another one. And the EDI for bioinformatics training, this was a really interesting point of view, because it's something that we would like to have on the Education Summit as known. And then it was decided to have a Latin forum to share ideas, to discuss particular inputs, and to bring together all the efforts that are happening in different places. Next slide, please. So in day 3 in numbers, there were 49 people attended from at least 24 different countries and across the 5 continents. Sarah already talked about the 3 time zones, so it was really interesting to have the input of different people from different backgrounds, from different areas. So this was really great. Please, next slide. So the outcomes were to discuss in the first place the guidelines. I think that this paper is already in the round for being published, so this was put on practice and to discuss every topic on the guidelines, and was really enrichment and interesting. And then, well, most of the next sessions were more like assessing the particular challenges to arise the problems, and then we could be able to arrive at a possible solution. So we discussed about the infrastructure, and there were really interesting ideas. Developing and increasing bioinformatics training and not hotspot regions also were a lot of discussion about it, and most of the conclusions were we need to get together, and that is why the LATAM forum were really interesting to have. Next slide, please.
Maria, so now you have 3.5 minutes left.
Yeah, thank you. So I will make it quicker. These language barriers and ADI bioinformatics training were really interesting. The people get really happy about the work that they've done. We are currently working on language barriers, and we have a task force for EDI. People are really interested on keep working on the impact or the consideration of EDI in courses and also in the events. And at the end, the LATAM Forum helped us to bring all these ideas together. And we currently are working on Cabana on the further steps. So I think that this could really be a boost if we bring together all the people and talk and share what we have. Next slide. So as I said before, the next steps, well, the guidelines are ready to be published. We need to keep working on different areas. And next step, the next slide, please. All these three sessions were meant to continue the work that we are trying to keep the communication. We are working with the different association of informatics in Latin America to keep working on this. Next slide, please. I don't know, Sarah, if you would like to summarize.
Yes, so I can jump in for this final bit. So thank you very much, Maria. So at this point, really, it's just to summarise where we've got to at the end. So the summit, as we said, is the start point. Really, it's then continuing this work over the year. So we will set up these theme task forces so that we can focus on the competencies, the virtual training, the fair training, and the EMnet training. Actually says, of course, next year event at the GOBLET AGM for the fair training. In terms of feedback on the 2021 event, I mean, the good news was that we had some really good feedback. Most people really enjoyed it. They'd be quite happy to attend a virtual summit in similar format. And these were just some of the great comments we got back from people. A look ahead to 2022, really it's thinking about where do we go next, and the potential suggestion proposal that's been raised is that we have a focus more on Asia, Australia in terms of the organisers. The likelihood is, I guess, it will remain virtual, but you know, we've talked about this potential for hybrid local hub events maybe, and obviously we need to think about what topics we focus on. Main thing is, if you want to get involved, actually there is a Google Doc. I will check that we have a tab specifically from this AGM, but you know, it'd be great to know if there's any others who'd like to get involved with us, please let us know. Because there are, as I say, the monthly meetings, and there's obviously the future summits as well. So in the last few seconds, I'd like to say thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to tell you, and we're happy to answer any quick questions or answer them in chat or in the doc. Thank you.